On the theory that shorter is better, I'm going to do just one point today. Tell me if you like it better. Here's the one point. Why PEOTUS, the President-elect of the United States, Donald Trump, is disrespecting US Intel. Now, this obviously should have a question mark after it, because I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. And here are the points that create this confusion. One, what he knows and what he does not know. Here's what we know on both of those points. One, according to he or his staff, he hasn't even met with the heads of the intel agencies yet. And let's put to the side how unorthodox that is, how unusual, and how many questions that raises about how prepared he'll be when he starts doing this job for full time and in earnest in just a couple of weeks. So he hasn't even met with them. He hasn't been briefed about intel regarding the Russian hacks directly, and yet he says he knows something that makes him feel suspicious of the intel. Now, what is that? Well, that could be a couple of different avenues for him. First one is he knows that the intel community stinks, which is apparently his opinion, and he'll say weapons of mass destruction. Now his people are saying, you know, they said Benghazi was about a video. None of that is completely true. WMD, even his own guy, James Woolsey, who used to be the head of the CIA, and he is Trump's guy, says even that isn't fair. Yes, they got nukes about WMDs in Iraq wrong, but there were chemical and biological agents in there that the intelligence community was not wrong about. Were they wrong about yellow cake and that stuff? Yes. Was that a problem? Yes. Was that about the intel community as much as it was about the administration and the politics at that time? Think about that, because the politics probably overpowered the intel in that situation. Benghazi, it's its own morass, but again, nobody says that was of the intel community's making. So, he badmouths intel on those bases. Then there's another basis that seems to be the there in terms of what the president-elect is saying he knows. Assange, Julian Assange. This is not about the WikiLeaks guy and why he is hiding in that embassy and doesn't want to face justice in Sweden for those rape allegations. That doesn't help his character, for sure, but that's not what this is about. Nobody questions whether or not the DNC emails, at least in the main, were authentic, okay? So people will say that, oh, WikiLeaks, what are you saying? He didn't get it wrong. They never get it wrong. It's not about that. That's a distraction. It's the sourcing that matters. Julian Assange has always said up until now, geez, we barely even know the sourcing on ours. That's how secretive it is. If you give stuff to us, you are protected. We will never say who gives it to us. He switches from that to now talking about his sourcing, which he usually doesn't do. And he says it wasn't Russia. Julian Assange also asked for security from Russian forces while he was in that embassy. How do we know? Well, that's what the Ecuadorian journalists were very upset about, and they started writing about it. They had their own sources within the embassy that said that. Why did he want Russian security? Also, we also know that his internet access was cut off in that embassy, and the reporting on that is that it was done because of the influence of Russian actors that were being found getting into Assange in the embassy. So you put those pieces together, and then he says it had nothing to do with Russia, which really wasn't even what he says. He's saying his source for the emails was someone other than Russia. Well, that doesn't mean that Russia wasn't involved, and for whatever reason, Sean Hannity didn't ask Julian Assange if he knew whether or not Russia was involved. Why not? Fallacy of proof. People keep saying, well, when they show us the evidence of who and why and what, that's just ignorance on your part, okay? Or whoever says that. Intel doesn't work like the FBI. I'm a lawyer. I love evidence. I love proof. I love that. That's great. You hear from the FBI all the time when they're making a case. Intel is more of an alchemy than that. And that's not, it's not a hedge. It's not a cop-out. They don't reveal sources and methods for two reasons. One, there's an inexactness of it. It's a spy game. People are trying to hide. It's harder. It's circumstantial. Secondly, they don't want the bad guys to know. The irony here is Donald Trump was always saying, why are we always telling people how we do things? Why are we always alerting the enemy to what we're doing? Now he's asking for exactly that from the intel community to Russia, of all people, who would obviously love to know how it is that the intel community tracked this down, how they got tips on Fancy Bear and the other outfits. They'd love to know it. The intel community doesn't like to share it. The intel community, on its own behalf, has not been shy about this. Clapper came out in October and said, we think it's Russia, okay? Why they did it is a secondary consideration, is not as clear-cut from my understanding of the reporting. But who was behind it, they've said Russia all along. So it's not as easy as just saying, show us the document that proves that you know it's them. Russia and Putin. Again, it does seem as though The president-elect is protecting Putin and Russia on this issue. Why would he do that? We do not know, but it doesn't seem to be good for him unless it's part of some larger architecture that we don't understand. Two last quick points. The future. He's bad-mouthing the president-elect, our intelligence agencies. That's not going to bode well for the relationship going forward. My experience with that community is they do their job regardless of how they feel about the politicians in play at that time, but this can't help. We've never seen someone be so oppositional to the men and women who are trying to keep us safe as Donald Trump is right now. And then the what then? So when he gets his briefing, and these men and women sit down with him and say, here's why we think it's Russia, here's why we think it's Russia, here's why we think it's Russia, here's why we think it's Russia. We don't think it's anybody else. Yes, there are lots of other actors in this space, but here's why we think they were behind it. Well, now what? Now what does Donald Trump say? Does he come out and say, oh, I was wrong? Never heard him say that before. Allison said today, well, he said that about President Obama. No, that was about his personal assessment of somebody before he knew him and then after he knew him. This is about facts that he denies, facts that he says, aren't really in place. How's he going to deal with that then? Is he going to come out and say, I was dead wrong, I should have never doubted our intelligence agencies? What's that going to do for his credibility? So anyway, one point, this is all that's driving this concern behind the president-elect's perspective on Russia's role in hacking during the elections.